Hello, welcome to the Internal Momentum podcast. Today we have Christine Lenghaus. Welcome to the podcast, Christine.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
First of all, I'd just love for you to just explain who you are and what you do.
So I started Maths Heroes about 10 years ago. My mother passed unexpectedly, and I always had this thing in my back of my mind to do something with mathematics. And that was the catalyst that I said, okay, it's not going to die with me. I had to bring it out. I've worked through the identity issues of, I was always saw myself as a teacher, and now to see myself as a business person as well.
What was your past life when it came to teaching?
I actually was in corporate world as a trainer for a long time, so overseas, 5.5 years and all of that sort of thing. But once I had my daughter, I needed a much more child-friendly occupation. There was no altruistic, I'm going to save the world with my mathematics. I needed a job as a mum that I could get school holidays with. And the further I went into it, the more I fell in love with it. I've always loved maths, but it was always taught as a test of memory for me. And I just used to say I've got a really good memory. But I could see my kids just suffering through it. And I thought, we have to do better than this. And I had some very, very honest Year 9 boys. And they said, Miss, what do we need this for? And I was doing, some sort of algebra. I said, because that's the way I was taught. And inside me, I knew that wasn't okay. And it caused me so much of a gear grind. I went, I've got to do better. And how do I do better? And that was the first step on the yellow brick road of we have to do better for these kids because it's not fair. Maths is used as a gatekeeper in education. If you want to be a police person, you want to anything pretty much, they'll say, oh, you need a maths. And I think it gets a bad rap for that. And then the students have to suffer through it. And it's not something to be suffered through. It's joy, it's curiosity, it's exploration, it's problem solving, it's all of that good stuff. And I'm still curious and learning how to teach better all the time. My cousin says to me, every day is a school day, Christine. So I say to myself, every day is a school day and I've got something to learn and I've got somewhere to grow. And I saw the same problems keep coming up all the time. These kids, they want to do the right thing by you, but they're stuck, and it might be stuck, it might be stuck doing subtractions or it might be stuck doing a multiplication, but it's really hard to do a double somersault, triple backflip when you're still just learning to walk. You've got the crawling down pat, but, to be able to skip and jump and hop and all of that, wow, that's a whole lot of extra skill that I could see the student. Yeah, it wasn't fair because it didn't have to be like that.
I know my experience as a kid, maths was one of those things that it could be very daunting. It could be very overwhelming and you'd look at something and you just didn't understand it. And I was very fortunate to have had encouraging parents who really sort of said, no, you're good at maths. No, just keep at it. You'll get there. And I feel like I took that on and I'm like, okay, I can do this. So when I would encounter a maths problem I couldn't do, I just saw it as, well, I just haven't learnt this yet. So if I stick at it, I'll get good at it. And then I would get good at it. And then it sort of reinforced that learning. And I've seen people, including some of my kids, go the other direction, which is I can't do this. And then it almost reinforces that. But I'm wondering, in your experience, how early do kids usually make that decision, whether they're good or bad at maths?
Actually, quite early. That's my own personal opinion, but we need to catch them. I mean, most people can count to 10. And most people, that sort of thing. But once you start only teaching, via tricks or, without the understanding of the actual concept, we lose them. And then it just starts this process of, I've got to remember this trick, and then I can do the next trick, and the next trick, and the next trick. And that becomes overwhelming. Whereas if you actually understand a concept, and then I show you another application of it, so I'll show you maybe a multiplication and then I'll show you the algebraic version of it. And you go, they're actually two connected concepts. I can actually understand that. And when you stack the concepts, you reduce how much brain power you actually need because you see the patterns. When you see the patterns, that's what maths is. Is there a pattern and how many, have I got? Once you can start to see the patterns, it's not like learning a new thing every time, It's like, oh, that's joined to that, which is joined to that, and it's joined to there, and it's joined to there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can see how that would work because so many of the things that we do day to day is so automatic because we've done them over and over and over. It's like when I go to tie my shoes up, I'm not thinking this is difficult or how am I going to do this? It happens without any effort whatsoever. And I assume that's similar when it comes to maths. It's like the first 10 or 20 times you're doing it, it takes a lot of brain power and a lot of effort to learn it. But then it becomes a lot more automatic, like driving or like
Yep,
walking or all these other
yep,
skills. And
yep.
yeah, so I imagine for people who struggle with maths, they see it as this massive problem that is always going to be difficult rather than realizing that if they just get past that hurdle and then it becomes automatic, it'll no longer require this mass amount of effort, which is probably where all that overwhelm comes from.
Yeah, and that's so to go back to your shoe analogy, the whole idea of getting dressed, right? You actually learn bottom up when you talk about, being able to drive a car and do it automatically. That automaticity is top down. So you build a block. I've got to put a sock on my foot. You build a block. I've got to put a shoe on my foot. I've got to tie the laces, and that's the actual blocks needed, the code needed in your brain, the connections to actually say put a shoe on and be ready to walk. It's the same with getting dressed. I need a block about, putting on a top. Well, if you've ever watched a child put a top on, it's back to front, inside out, the head goes through the sleeve. All of those things show that the code isn't there yet. And it's that yet word because they will get it with enough repetitions, and so we're going to build those blocks up. Is it the right way? Is it inside out or the right way? Where's the front? Where am I aiming with my head? We'll build those blocks, and then eventually you'll run that program top down, and it'll be put a top on, and you'll think, oh, piece of cake, you know. And every time, my students would struggle, and I'd say, you have to remember you don't have those connections in your brain yet. We've got to make them, and they start off as a little dirt track out the back of whoop whoop, and you want them then, to be a bike track, and then you need eventually, the cars going, and then a 4-lane freeway. And that's how solid that
Yeah,
connection needs to be. But if it's only like that, of course it's going to be hard, and it's going to.
yeah,
And the first time you do anything has to be the hardest because you don't have any of that code written in your brain yet. And that
mm,
hardware needs the software to run. Can you rewrite software? Of course you can. I'm not a maths person. I'm learning to be a maths person. That's fine. So, if you hold, and I deliberately learn things myself. So I'm learning Spanish, or I'm learning, whatever, because I need to feel that uncomfortableness of learning to remind myself what my students feel like. Because,
yeah,
I can have a 1,200-day streak on Duolingo, but, every lesson I think, oh, I'm still at have and has, and, and that uncomfortableness and that consternation, that churn, if you like, in your brain just says that connection's not strong enough yet. And when you can run it top
mm,
down, you have the automaticity and you're on the freeway. So you
mm.
just go.
Yeah, I find it incredible that maths is one of those things, and art is probably the same with people with drawing. How quickly people are to put it in a box and say, you're not that sort of person. Like you don't see anybody who's an adult who says, I'm not a getting dressed person. I'm not good at
Yep,
getting dressed.
yep,
But it's the exact same process that when they were kids, they were not good at it and they didn't make a decision. And no adult said to them, it's okay. You're just the sort of person who can't get dressed. It's okay. You don't need to learn that skill. Yet something like maths, which is arguably just as important as getting dressed, I think parents a lot of the time make those excuses and almost say to kids, it's okay. You don't have to be
yep,
good at maths. You're
yep,
just not that way, or you're just not
yeah,
artistic. Some people don't have that natural talent. And I do believe a lot of it is us putting our own insecurities perhaps on our kids. And yeah, it's just strange because when you explain it the way you did with the highway and just getting those connect, it's the answer to it is to just continuously do it again and again and again. And over time you will develop those, like you said, those pathways will
yep,
become active.
yep, yep,
So
yep. And and that that
mm,
that Yeah, that idea that the first time is the hardest and all of that sort of stuff. I actually say to students, because I'm a nerd, I've Googled it. I say to them, how many exceptions to I before E do you think there really are? And they'll have a guess. And like, have a guess, Ben. Have a guess.
I don't know, 20?
900, right? And I say to, and
My goodness.
that's my reason for saying maths is actually easier to learn than English. Because if you were born in Japan, Ben, what would you speak?
Japanese.
And if you were born in Kenya, you would speak Swahili. And if you were born in France, you would speak French. It's in there, right? The ability to learn is in there, and we need to bring it out,
Mm.
because you would have learnt Japanese if you have had the environment of being in Japan. I didn't learn English until I went to kindergarten because my parents were both, war immigrants. They came as kids. They had next to nothing in terms of schooling. So, and that's part of the environment, in my head. It's like, you can learn Spanish because you know Dutch, and you've learned English. But even just learning it as a second language or third language, not just as we were as kids, with our grandparents and so on, it's also very different. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I say to the student. I say, I know with every single cell in my body that you can do mathematics, right? So my job is to find the questions, the resources, the techniques, whatever it is, to bring that out and help. I can't do it for them any more than I can play a musical instrument for them or paint a picture for them or whatever. I can't do it for them, but I can absolutely show them that they actually have mathematics as their superpower. And that's
Yeah.
the feeling that I want them to have. That, and look, if they never use mathematics and they believe they honestly won't, I still say to them, no one will actually care more about your money than you. So you need to understand, at least that much of it. So
Yeah.
usually that wins them over.
Yeah. The idea of being a superhero or a math superhero is really great. And I think as a child, it's something we resonate with, and everyone wants to be a hero. I think about it whenever I would encounter math problems. I always looked at that almost with a sense of curiosity and fun, and this is something to figure out. A bit like if you put a puzzle on the table and you were going to do a puzzle, it's like, oh no, this is fun, let's do a puzzle together. Where you wouldn't sit there and think, oh no, we've got a puzzle, this is going to be so hard. It's like, no, this is going to be
Yeah.
fun. And I often would frame maths in that way and see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know there's other people who would, perhaps see it as proof that they're not smart. They'd just be like, oh, it's too hard.
Yeah.
And when somebody makes that decision early in life that they're not good at maths, what are the longer term consequences of that belief that follow them through school? Like, what sort of doors quietly close because someone opts out of maths early?
I have yet to meet a trade that doesn't use mathematics, whether it's as simple as counting, what's 10% of GST and, all of those sorts of things, or, lengths and areas and you name it, they use it. I mean, that's how you get water to flow downhill as a plumber. You need gradient, you need an understanding of those concepts, and even just on a daily budgeting, things like that, you know, you need to understand it. And I'm highly biased because I see mathematics in everything. If I see a petrol tanker at the petrol station and the guy thinks he's just filling up the tanks underneath, and I'll say, so how many petrol stations can you visit before you've run out of enough, fuel, or how many hours or how fast is it pumping? And, there's so much mathematics going on in there. And it's not until you have a conversation with them that they go, yeah, there is actually a lot of maths in that. So the game for me is to, when I meet people, is to, find out what they do and then actually uncover the mathematics for them almost, so that they can almost see through my glasses and say, well, actually, I didn't realize, but, that is problem solving. That is, whatever it happens to be. Yeah. Mixing colours for hair, if you're a hairdresser, or if you're a farmer and you've got a roll of hay, it's got a percentage of water, it's got a percentage of fibre, it's got a percentage of protein. And, if you've got lactating cows, the dairy cows or whatever, they need, so many grams to be able to feed properly. It doesn't matter what you're doing, mathematics will underpin it. Yeah, every time.
I've noticed that in the business world, there's maths everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere from generating leads to doing your finances. And yeah, it's unavoidable. And I think most successful people in the world have a very firm grasp on general mathematics. Once you have the foundations in place, the things that seem complex about the higher ones are actually not that complex once you've got the foundations set right. They're the next logical steps. It's
Yeah.
kind of like trying to build a paragraph before you've learnt a sentence or a word or a letter. It's very difficult to read a book if you haven't learnt how to identify letters. So
Yep.
yeah, I
Yep.
think it is the building blocks there and realizing
Yes.
that it's quite obvious how to do it, but it's just taking that order. And I think as well, if children have had those moments where they've missed out on some of the core learnings, sometimes to fill those gaps could be quite difficult.
Yeah. So in the English analogy for that is first you learn to read so that you can read to learn.
Yeah.
So with mathematics, you learn about numbers and their place values. You know, a 1 can be in 100 means this, in, 0.01 means 100th. Like you need to understand that we have counting numbers and the place value and so on. And then once you've got that, so that's up to year 2, perhaps year 1, then you start to learn about adding and subtracting and multiplying. And then it's just a game of multiplying and adding. Sometimes adding's easier, sometimes multiplying's easier. Whether you're doing
Mm,
numbers or calculus, or logarithms, it's still the same game. Sometimes adding's easier, sometimes
yeah.
multiplying. Yeah.
Well, if I remember back to multiplication growing up for me, it was always about the speed in which you could recall. It was very much a memory game. It's like, I'm going to remember my times tables. And it was almost like we did a song and we learnt it through just, it was like, what color's the sky? Blue. What seven sevens? What? I know that. No, but what it is it was almost like we would play games to say who could say it quicker. And when it became about memory, I knew a lot of people who knew their times tables and it was useful to know them. Memorizing things is not necessarily the same as understanding them. And I'd love for you to explain why multiplication works for some kids and completely fails for others.
Yeah. So memorizing and rote learning is a part of all learning. That's how you start. You think about when you got into a car, this is the accelerator, this is the brake, right? That, you just memorized that foot and that foot, right? And if you've driven different cars over the years, like all of my cars, when I was learning to drive and when my first years was always the indicator was on the right-hand side. I now have a car that it's on the left-hand side, and the number of times I put the windscreen wipers on, it shows you how ingrained that memory is, that connection is so solid. So learning things by memory is not bad in itself, but learning is far more than just putting it in because it needs to be connected. If I teach you how to go from my house to the supermarket and my house to the post office, it doesn't mean that you know how to get from the post office to the supermarket in my town. That connection's not there. So we need to make connections for the students and show them that it is actually this spider web, if you like. And by just testing memory, you know what it's like. You've got 6 things in your mind and someone says, "Oh, yeah, I've got to remember to get the milk tonight." One of the other balls that you were juggling drops off, and then later on it'll pop
Mm,
back up and you go, "Oh, yeah, I was going to have to remember to do that," because you can literally juggle 6 balls or 6 things in your memory. Your brain is not a Post-it note. You can literally juggle 6 things at once. And so when we are expecting students to memorize tricks or whatever it is, their cognitive load is just through the roof and it just gets too heavy to carry almost. But I can teach you simply and I can say, rightio, here's 1, we're going to double it. There's another one. So now I've got 2. If I double this, I've got 4. And if I double this, I've got 8. And actually, it doesn't matter what this finger is, an elephant, a ribbon, a 7, a whatever. This works every time, and you understand the eightness of a number being double, double, double. And for students,
mm.
that gives them far more access to anything that's 8 than memorizing some times tables or multiplication facts or whatever you want to do. So just to hit back on 7 sevens are 49, grade 5 when I went to school, we used to do tables races, and PK and I were always the last two standing, which means we actually knew our times tables and we didn't need the practice, which was the whole problem with doing it that way. And she said 7 sevens. And I was like, oh, I haven't got that one in my memory, you know? But if I had have understood 7 as 5 and 2 more, I could have said, oh, I know 7 fives are 35, 2 sevens are 14, 35 and 14 are 49. I could have done it as a 4 and a 3. I could have, it doesn't matter. I could have done 10 sevens, take away 3 sevens. When you understand how 7 can be pulled apart and put back together, I'm not testing your memory anymore. I'm testing your understanding of the concept 7. And that is
Yeah.
far more powerful than just memorizing. Because even if I said to you, when you understand numbers, like what's, 7 letters before P, right? Like that's really hard because you have to sing the whole song. When you put it in linearly, you have to pull it out linearly, right? But when you
Mm.
understand numbers, if I said to you, what's 7 less than 15? I don't care if you count backwards, whatever it is, however you get there, you can do it if you understand how numbers are put together. So yeah, memory is a part of it, but not all of it. And actually, when you want to make those connections solid, it's actually about taking that knowledge out of your brain and reusing it, or whether it's in a quiz or whatever it is, it's actually the process of pulling it out of your brain that makes it even stronger.
Yeah, I know with a lot of mathematical concepts, I struggle to teach them, largely because I've learnt them and they're so ingrained that I don't even know. Like, I couldn't explain how I get to that answer. You're just like, oh, you sort of ask me and I just know it. And
Yeah.
there is a logical process that I use, but I'm not aware of it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's, I guess that's what happens when it becomes, like you said, those pathways become so strong that it
It's
happens.
the
It's like,
automaticity. Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
It's like if you ask me how do I lift my arm above my head, like I just do it. I don't. There's no way that I can explain it, and it's
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
There's that strange way that it works.
And as a teacher, it was, well, you just do it. I had the automaticity. So for me to then say, put myself in the shoes of a learner learning mathematics, that's my challenge to see what their questions are and where their hurdles are and where their problems are, because that's where I have to then nuance in and be able to pull apart and put it back together again so that they do understand. Yep.
Yeah. When you work with a student who genuinely thinks that they're dumb because of maths, like how does that belief actually show up emotionally for them?
They've just shut down. You can see it in their body language, their energy. It's pretty obvious that, this is a pretty painful episode for them. Yeah, they're just suffering the, you know, through the process. It's tough going, and it takes it. Learning is absolutely a journey. It's not an event. It is not oh, this will absolutely fix it. It's not like that. You need the repetitions. They need to see the successes so many times because they've got so many layers of I can't do this. I'm not good at it or whatever, that you've got to rip apart to give them that strength of, well, actually, I don't know, but I can find out and I'll give it a go and yep, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if I've got a child who unquestionably thinks that they're bad at maths, and I want to be able to support them in getting some assistance in changing that belief, what are some things that I can do? Is there things I could say? Are there activities I could do? What's a good place to start?
Absolutely, always be encouraging, but like reading books is something you do with children, reading stories and things like that. So maths games, play dice, get them this being able to see. Can you see the number on that dice? Is that visible?
Yep.
Yep. This is what we call sabotizing. So being able to see that that's a 6 without physically having to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's the start of it, because if you've got a picture of what it looks like, then you can start playing, right? Because if you can see 6 as 5 and 1, 4 and 2, If you're playing trouble on the board, and you get a 6, you want to be able to, hop 6 rather than go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the start. Counting everything is the start, but it's also the slowest. So it's the least efficient, most likely to get an error. And if you have to count every single one every single time, that's why maths is so painful. I only count by ones when I have to. And the part that moves, so after being able to see a number with the dice patterns and dots and so on, the ability to double any number. So if I put that many fingers up and you put just as many fingers up, so we've doubled it, you can see
Yeah.
that these two are going to make a 10, and then this is going to be the 2. So 10 and 2 is 12. And being
Mm.
able to see that. I mean, if you've got a really young child, without taking their socks and shoes off, just ask them to draw their foot. Do they actually know that they've got 5 toes? Things like that. But the ability to
Yeah.
double, because it doesn't matter if I'm doubling 6 or 60, 600, the size of that piece doesn't change how many I'm going to end up with. It's always going to be 12 when I double it. But it might be 12 ones, it might be 12 hundreds, it might be 12 thousands. It doesn't matter. So the size of the piece doesn't change it. And doubling is that first step, if you like, on that rung. Blink is a really, really nice quick card game that has matching on colour, shape and number. So I play it with the builder's 5-year-old daughter, and I deal 2 cards to me, 1 card to her. So I have to do it twice as fast. That's how I used to play against my daughter. And it's just that pattern recognition, it's that pattern
Mm.
recognition and that sort of things. If your kids, because as soon as I say a doubling, right? So if we said double 6 is 12, is 12. When you've got 6 out of 12, straight away you can see that that's the half. That's 50%. It actually leads on to many other concepts. Even if you had a rectangle 2 by 6, the area is 12. Things like that. So those sorts of things are really, really foundational building blocks that I think we used to skip over or just assume that kids had.
Mm.
So that whole idea of having a picture to match the language, to share meaning and understanding. So when I say my surname is Lenghaus, if I write that on the board, the students have no idea how to pronounce it. And it's challenging. So I draw a little house underneath and I line under the letters, and straight away they've got it because they've got an image and the syntax and they can share meaning. But if you don't have a picture of those numbers, it then just goes and it falls back to remember this trick, remember this fact, remember, remember, remember. And you'll
Yeah.
hit your overload again. And it'll be just, students trying to jump through hoops.
So when I think of maths and not being good at maths, a lot of the beliefs happen really early on. And then that continues on for years and years and years. Now, if I was a teenager, I'm 16, I'm at the back half of high school, or perhaps I'm even an adult and I'm 30 or 40 years old and I've spent my whole life thinking I'm bad at maths. I haven't really got the foundations. I can do some basic addition, but I hate maths. It's always hard. It's difficult. I hear you saying that this is just a belief. It can be changed. You can be good at maths. You can be a maths hero.
Yep.
I suspect there's part of me that's just like, it seems like so much work. I've got all these years. I don't want to go back and do 10 years worth of maths. I don't want to go
Sure.
back to being like a child, a little 2-year-old learning how to do basic
Yeah.
maths. So where do I start if I'm at that point? Like, is there somewhere I can go? Is there something I should do? Is there like, what would you say to people when they're in that situation and they know that it's a belief, but it just looks like a lot of work?
Can you make it a game to yourself? So when I drive along a road and you see the distances between towns, sometimes I just play a game of how far is it between those 2 towns, or, just to see, because the more you play, the better you get. And it doesn't matter whether it's golf or football or singing or playing a musical instrument. It's the practice that actually will get you better. To find a way to play, because usually when we play, the fear goes down and you just go, yeah, oh, well, I lost my life. I'm going to start again. It's not the end of the world. And unfortunately, literacy gets a good rap in Australia in terms of, there's places to go if you want help with literacy. I don't honestly believe there's that much around for mathematics, which is a real gap in the place in the market, I suppose, because even when I was at TAFE, I went in as a numeracy specialist because each of the people, whether they were horticulture or animal studies or plumbing or whatever, they had their own specialist knowledge about the topic. They weren't necessarily specialists about mathematics. So I absolutely appreciate that it is tricky. And for me, it's how do I make it into a game that I'm not going to be threatened by? I've helped people that are older, even just navigating a calculator because they may not have had a calculator at school, and it's this stuff you take for granted, you know. Um, it there's definitely room for improvement there.
You recently worked with some children in Africa, in Kenya,
Yeah.
and I would love to hear what that experience was like for you. What did that strip back? What did it clarify for you?
Wow, what an eye opener! It was an extraordinarily humbling experience. I spent a week in Nairobi and then I traveled across the country to the Ugandan border and I just went to a different school every day for a week. The first school that I went to, we went in and the guy said, "Yep, you can have the year 9 students." And I was like, "Okay." And I'd spoken to the 2 teachers beforehand about what we were going to do, thinking limited resources. So the students came into the classroom. In Australia, we wouldn't put more than about 60 kids in that classroom. We had over 270. They all carried their own chair in. Some of them had a pen and a paper. So we ended up sharing. We did an activity. And they were so thirsty for knowledge. It was incredible. It was incredible. Traditional teaching where, someone's standing up the front at the board or whatever. I was in the middle of 270 students and I couldn't actually move. The other people were sort of walking around between the groups and so on. And the guy who was the head of middle school at the beginning was quite skeptical. And, I think he thought it was quite a challenge and it was. But at the end, he was so pleased because the group that I was with, they actually run like a maths after school program to get the kids interested and to show them how different it can be. And so we were trying to get that buy-in, and at another school, the whole school came out to take a photo with me because it was such a novel experience to have, someone come to their school even, let alone, some white woman who's over 50. And they, and it was about, that, and we do it here in Australia too, overcoming that challenge of, oh, my students aren't ready for algebra. So we were in with a grade year 2, year 3 group. And the guy from the organisation, he said, let's just give it a try, And the kids they just solved it however they could. And for them, that was the beautiful part because it wasn't me saying, you have to do it this way. It was, in your groups of 2 or 3, and you talk to one another and you try different strategies and this worked. And, it's like solving the puzzle. Oh, the pieces didn't fit that way. Pull it all apart. Let's have another go. And at the end we had this beautiful discussion and the kids came up to the board and it was so empowering for them. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I'm still working with the teachers from Australia now, and I will inevitably go back. And I also volunteered before COVID or just around that time, 2020. It was just around that time in Guatemala. That's why I'm learning the Spanish. That's when I started to fall in love with the fact that there are so many people who need support and want to learn. And how can we, that typical lift all boats, how can we do that? So part of my Maths Heroes mantra is we have 1 billion learners to support. Because that's the drive for me to get out there and to, get up every day and go, okay, now I've got to work on business part, this, and this. But actually, I just want to serve more learners because those kids, whether they're in Syria, Guatemala, you name it, Kenya, those kids know that education is a way that they can lift their life expectancy, their standard of living, everything. It's so highly valued, so highly valued. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did that experience give you as far as teaching how things are learned regardless of culture?
So, for example, yeah, you need to, the thing is, there's no point in me as a teacher saying, you should be here, right, where I am, because that doesn't work. right? So the art of teaching is to find out where they are, walk across the bridge, meet them where they are, and then come across together. And that was very much in Kenya, even though these students were year 9. When I had some playing cards, I was doing a problem-solving playing cards thing, and I said, "I've got 10 cards." And the gentleman whose organisation it was, he said, "So, who knows how to count to 10?" And they were all like, and he said, "Who can do that?" So he actually made a student stand up and count in English to 10 because he knew not everybody in that room would be able to do that because the language barrier, whatever else. And actually just going, that simple process of going, well, let's count to 10. And then when they heard me count, we're just trying to build that bridge so that we come across together. So, and every student has a different experience. So, you know, where do I start? And how far back do I go to pull them with me? That's extraordinarily challenging with one student, let alone 25 in a classroom. But that's the game. And that's when a student goes, "Oh," that's when you know you've got them. And you're saying, "What just happened inside your brain?" And they're like, and then they'll explain as best they can that connection that just got made. And it might have been like that for a long time, but then it went click. And, that is my happy place when the students go, yeah.
I'd love to hear just a example of, a child that you've worked with where, they really did have that belief that they were bad at maths and where it's actually really turned around and they've got to a point where it's now something they think is one of their strengths.
Yeah, and that usually is when I'm tutoring with one-on-one with students because that's the time that I can actually intensely focus on exactly the gap that they have. I had one student at a school that I used to work in Melbourne, and my speciality was kids that were struggling. So I had a small class. The principal was fabulous about it, and there was one particular young boy and this day, he'd just been all over the shop, and I just let him stand outside for a minute. I said, "You just need to calm down," and he actually snuck back in the classroom, because he wanted to come into the maths classroom. And I think if they want to be in my maths classroom, they will learn. I did the standard deviation of a Big Mac with my kids. That's the only time I've ever been Snapchatted with my maths classes, And when you can do those sorts of memorable things, they go, "Okay, she's on my side. She believes in me. Maybe I need to start doing that too."
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think a big part of it is the encouragement from others, or do you think it's got to be that self-driven
It's
encouragement?
both. It's both. It's both. Because if all you've ever thought is, I'm not a maths person, I'm not good at maths and da 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 da, you need someone to start building that strength up. It's like getting a personal trainer or whatever it is. They'll push you that little bit more and you'll go, "Yep, okay, I can bench 50 kilos today," or, "I can run that little bit faster," or whatever it happens to be. It's always when you're in the picture, you can't see the frame. And those students don't even realize how much progress they've made. And you remind them, "Well, remember when you first started, we couldn't even do this, and now you're doing that." Oh, we forget.
If you were able to wave a magic wand and change sort of one sentence that kids say to themselves, what would that be?
You have maths as a superpower. Might not be your strength yet, but it absolutely exists. Absolutely, 100% certain of it. That much I know
Yeah.
is true.
Was there any, based on everything we've talked about, is there anything you'd like to explore in a little bit more detail?
Think your identity as to who you are. I am a maths person. I'm not a maths person. You have to realize that it changes. It's almost like chapters in a book. That page I might not have been a maths person, but the next chapter I can be. And you're always writing in your book. And so whether it's a word or a sentence, a paragraph, a chapter, whatever it is, you get to write that for yourself. So if you're going to back yourself, you can do it. You'll go and find the people that you need to help you, and you'll build those muscles and the connections, and you will be able to do it. It might not be, a mung bean into a bean shoot that takes a week. It might be an acorn into an oak tree and it takes a lifetime. But if it's worth it to you, you'll do it.
It reminds me of lots of areas of my life where I've believed one thing to be true and then I've proven it wrong and then I've been able to completely change and shift it. Like, I remember there was no way in the world I could ever be cool as a kid. Like, the idea
Yeah.
of me being cool or charismatic or having those access to those ways of being was impossible. And no, I was the shy, fat kid. Like, I wasn't the cool kid. Like, that's not me, never in a million years. Yet now I actually have access to be those things if I want to. And it's amazing to go through that journey of growth and get to that point of actually realizing that belief was untrue. And it was just a childish belief that I decided to pretend was real. And, I think being bad at maths is one of those things that I think
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
yeah, that identity is so locked up in it as well.
Yeah. And who you are at 5 is not who you are at 15, is not who you are at 25 or, 105. You actually get to grow and to become aware of, like that part, I don't like that part. I'll get rid of that bit. I'll keep this bit, you know? Oh, that's my weakness, but I really want to make it stronger. Okay, then I choose to work on it and I'll do the repetitions because it takes repetitions, practice, repetition, rehearsal, it's all that stuff. Yeah. You can't avoid doing the reps.
No. So obviously on an individual basis, kids can do what they've got to do and parents can help assist the kids and good teachers can help with that. But at a societal level, I know you're working on some things to really help to get maths to that next level where I guess the education system treats maths differently. I'd love for you to just tell me what you're up to, what you actually want to achieve, and what's the big game you're playing.
So, Ben, if I said to you, where is the home of mathematics in Australia? Right? We don't have one. If you want sporting venues, you want to go to theatre, you want to go to an art museum, you want to go to a history museum, there's Science Works, there's Questacon. You can do that for everything, but not mathematics. And so my big picture is to create a home for mathematics in Australia, and that will enable us to have 8th place for, well, what if you've got a student, your child really enjoys maths? Where do you take them? If they like sport, you can go to play the tennis court or you can go to the football match or whatever. But where do you go if your kid really likes maths? You don't, right? There is no home for mathematics. And if we want to change the culture, that's where it's got to start. We need to have a space for it, a place to call home.
Yeah. No, that would definitely help. And I know there's some interesting products. You've got an alternative to the remembering multiplication.
So I call them multiplicative thinking blocks because the kids or the students at school, it was times tables. If you want to, multiplication facts is what holds students back from accessing anything in secondary because it doesn't matter whether you're doing percentages, gradient, whatever. It's all about multiplication and division pretty much. But if you don't think that way, I describe it, that young lady, old lady picture. Right, there's a visual thing and there's an old lady, if you look that way, and a young lady. And if you can't see it, you can't do it. And then it falls back to test of memory. Doesn't work. Cognitive overload. Checked out. So for me, I had tried laminating paper and all this sort of stuff, but the students didn't see what I saw. So I went, okay, I need to do better. What do I need to do? And then that just, it snowballed into this. I see them as, we used to have the little wooden blocks. Remember the little wooden blocks? You may have had them as 1s and 10s and 100s. So to me, this is the next evolution of that, in that it's colourful, it's got place value, it's got addition, subtraction, it's got multiplication, division. It's everything in one tool. So it's like a Swiss Army knife for mathematics. So whether you're a primary or a secondary teacher, you can use it. Students aren't having to learn different tools every time. It's one tool the whole time. And we'll see, that's my goal. So in my mind, we have billions of learners to serve across. So the learners are the teachers, the learners are the students, and that's the ride. So I'm up for that for the next 40 years, I reckon, because it's my happy space.
I just really want to acknowledge the difference you're making out there. Like the fact that you've got this amazing way of thinking and this big goal of really just helping kids and helping people to become better at maths. And you've developed these tools and I can see that you've got this big vision. It's so nice to work with somebody who is not being driven by the monetary value of this. It's not like, hey, I need this business to make money. It really is, I need this business to get this out to make a difference. And really shows what you're up to and the sort of person you are, Christine. So look, it's been wonderful having you on today. And I really look forward to continuing to get to know you a little bit better and see if we can really get the word out there about the math problem that we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today, Ben.
No worries. Thanks, Christine. Take care.
Bye.